Generally speaking, amateurs and lower level players typically tend to underpump their footballs when compared to the pros. Maybe some of you guys have noticed this. Maybe you've jumped up to a higher level, whether that's the collegiate game, the semi-pro game, or the professional level, and you've seen that the footballs they use are pumped up to a much higher PSI. It can be jarring or shocking when you go to take that shot or that touch and it feels like they're rock solid. But why do pros do this? Why do higher level players prefer more over-pumped footballs? FIFA states that a football must be pumped between 8.5 and 15.6 PSI, or 0.6 to 1.1 atmospheres, which honestly is a really big range. The difference between 8.5 and 15.6 is massive. Most professional teams I've been on inflate their footballs between 11 to 13 PSI, and that always varies depending on the make and the brand of the football. For those of you that just do the field test, you don't know PSIs, you don't know atmosphere, that's when you can just barely push in your thumbs, maybe like a centimeter into the ball with all of your pressure, with all of your force. On the flip side, most amateur teams or men's league teams that I've played for typically have it around like 9 or 10 PSI. Or if you're doing the field test, it's when you can almost push the ball in like a full inch with your thumbs. One big reason for this huge range that FIFA gives is because the make and brand of different footballs varies so much. Professional teams in the USL Championship use select balls, and I've seen that most USL Championship teams pump up those footballs between 11 and 12 PSI. And I've seen from my own experience training with Nike balls in the offseason or Puma balls in the offseason or whatever, you have to pump all of those different footballs up to different PSIs to get the same feel as those select balls at 11 or 12. Sometimes I'm pumping up these Puma balls up to 13.5 PSI to feel the same level of hardness as the select balls. There's also different tiers of quality for every single brand. A $180 match grade ball can be pumped up to a higher PSI while still maintaining that soft feel because they're made with much better materials and the highest quality plastics or leather or whatever. While on the other hand, the cheaper $30 to $50 balls really start to hurt if they go above 11 PSI. That's because they're made with cheaper plastic that doesn't have that soft, cushy feel when you strike the ball. However, I've noticed that even if an amateur team still uses the match grade balls, they still underinflate them to around 9 or 10 PSI for games and training sessions. And in my opinion, the reason you see this is because the more a ball is pumped up, the harder it is to play with, and the higher skill level it takes to see a benefit from that more pumped up ball. It's very similar to golf, where these tour pros will use blades for their irons. They're much more finicky to hit, they're much harder to hit consistently, but when you can consistently hit them the right way, you can get much more control and precision and feedback from these clubs. How you pump up a football is actually very similar to that concept. A harder pumped up football can be hit with more power, more precision, more accuracy, more dip, more curve, more whip than a flatter football, but only when you strike the ball with the right technique. When you strike the ball with the wrong technique, or even the right technique in a slightly wrong area, that ball will be much less forgiving. The harder pumped up ball will exaggerate all the tiny little mistakes and make them appear to be a lot worse. A professional footballer who does this for their job, and I don't want to say mastered, but has come to a very high level of control over their technique in hitting the ball, is willing to use a less forgiving ball to maximize their power, maximize their accuracy, maximize their control over the movement and the shape of their shots, because they're much less likely to severely mishit it or to severely use the wrong technique. It still happens, but it's much less likely, and they want that control over the ball. While an amateur might opt to use a flatter ball because it's more forgiving. They can strike the ball slightly off center, they can slightly use the wrong part of the foot, and it will still have a decent trajectory in the general area that they want the ball to go. It's the same exact reason I don't use blades when I go to the golf course to hit a triple bogey every single hole. I don't get any of the benefits of the more control or the precision of their spin or the feedback from the golf ball or the golf club, and all I do is just shank more shots if I were to use blades. In a very similar way, trapping and controlling a ball is much harder with a pumped up ball. Think about the difference of trying to control a bouncing rubber ball versus like a hacky sack filled with sand. The hacky sack is incredibly easy to trap because you can just let it fall and it will just trap itself. A rubber ball, you have to have the exact perfect touch and control in order to kill that at your foot. A pumped up football acts more like a rubber bouncy ball, while a flatter ball will act more like the hacky sack. sack. A pumped up ball exaggerates everything. Every bounce is exaggerated higher, every heavy touch pops the ball further away from your foot. It exaggerates all the mistakes. However, most professional footballers that can consistently control and trap a pumped up ball every single time, or 99% of the time, they're fine with having a harder ball to control when they can use little micro touches and micro adjustments and get much more action and much more control, minute control over the football. It's like trying to roll back or push a rubber ball. It's easy to do that. It's hard, but it's easy compared to a hacky sack. It's really hard to control and do some ball mastery with that because it's just dead. So not only is a pro footballer able to get more power and accuracy and control from the way they strike a more pumped up ball, but they're also able to do little minute controls and touches with a pumped up ball versus a flat ball. The final reason that I've seen why amateurs prefer a slightly under pumped ball is for headers. A more pumped up ball hurts more when you head it, especially if you head it the wrong way with the wrong part of the head. But when pro footballers use a match grade football pumped up to 12 to 13 PSI, and every single time they're heading the ball with the right spot on their head, right in the middle of their forehead, like at their hairline, it really doesn't hurt too much unless the ball's really, really whipped in or dipping at you, something like that. But when you use the right technique at the right spot with the right timing, it's really not that painful. However, if that ball hits slightly off to the side or higher up on your head or the back of your head, that can be really painful, sometimes even dangerous. But again, pros work their entire life jumping, timing, using the right part of their head at the right moment to attack the football in the exact same spot on their forehead. Amateurs who might not have that same technique, that same timing, that same consistency might rather want a flatter, softer ball, so when they do mishead it or mistime it and hit it off the top of their head, it's not that painful. So overall, pros prefer a more pumped up football because they can maximize their power, their accuracy, and their control of that football, and they're willing to take the higher skill level that it takes to master it. Now, if you're watching this video and you're one of those people who just know they underinflate their footballs, or you go out and you test your footballs with a pressure gauge and you see you're like at 6 or 7 PSI, I'd really push you to start adding a little bit more air into that football when you train and play. I'm not saying to immediately go from a 7 PSI to a 13.5 PSI, but start to creep up. Maybe add 1 or 2 PSIs, get used to that, improve, and then keep on creeping up and up and up. And the reason for this is feedback and development. Again, with a flat football, it's so forgiving that you can strike the ball in the wrong way with the wrong part of the foot and the wrong part of the ball and still have it go decently in that direction that you want it to go. Sometimes you need to shank that ball or flub that ball to see, I'm not kicking it the right way. And it's very noticeable when you strike the ball with the right part of the foot and it's pumped up to the right PSIs, it will pop off your foot. And it's very, very obvious when you strike the ball in the right way. All that feedback that you get, the flub shots, the shank shots, the curling shots, the powerful shots, that's all feedback that you can take and you can learn from, and you can develop the right technique and consistently hit the right technique over and over again. It really will force you to learn the right things in the right ways, and I think it will speed up your development when you train. So anyway, guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. I hope I kind of gave you some insight into why pro footballers might pump up their balls a little bit more. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. All right, guys, peace.